Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And we are back.
We are back.
Today.
A minute ago, I was not back, but now I'm back.
It only took you a minute, huh?
Yes.
So today, this is sort of a combined topic that we both came up with like half of it, right?
Yeah, sort of.
Sort
yes. Well, I think I came up with 2/3 of it.
I see. Okay. He always gets more of the credit. That's fine. So today we're going to talk about how happiness makes you a better parent. You know,
yes.
How being happy will make you a better parent. And I know the first thing you're thinking.
And its corollary, how being miserable can make you a lousy parent.
Yes. And, you know, it's hard to think about being happy when you're going through divorce or child custody issues or whatever. Like, they're so stressful and they're so negative.
Yeah.
It's sort of like happiness is a luxury that you can't afford, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think being miserable is a luxury you can't afford.
I think that's true.
And a lot of times people prefer being miserable. It's funny, but being miserable attracts caretakers and people that will fawn on you and take care of you and sometimes take advantage of you.
Yes, it attracts. It can attract both sympathy in both a positive and negative way.
Correct.
Yeah. But there's something that, like, if you really get down to it and admit it, it's just hard to do. But there's some piece of that feels good.
Right.
You know, it feels good to have. I mean, we all want other people to care about us and take care of us and, you know, that kind of thing.
And it's kind of like, nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I'm going to go eat worms.
Right. Sit and feel sorry for yourself.
Sit and feel. Yeah, self-pity is spiritual death.
Yeah, it's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this sort of came out of, you guys know I'm a sort of a personal development junkie. And so a lot of times when I'm listening to something or whatever, then I'll turn around and share it with Thomas. We'll kind of have this whole conversation around it a lot of times. And that's kind of where this idea sort of came from for me. It was just, I was listening to Tony Robbins and he said, you know, if you're not growing, you're not happy.
Yes.
And we think about that. And I think that's a very true statement. The problem with our interpretation of that statement is we see growth as positive.
Right.
I mean, it is a positive thing, the impact of it, but sometimes the journey of growth is not positive.
Well, it's difficult because you have to move outside your boundary and your comfort zone to achieve any kind of growth.
That's right. But the growth,
you have to do something new, something else. Something you don't. If you do the same thing every time, you pretty much get the same result.
Right. You get if you keep doing the same thing over and over, you get the same result over and over. And so we have to have something different come in. And, you know, maybe you're the type of person that you're a little more proactive about that and you try to push yourself and push those boundaries. But I think it's very much human nature for a lot of us to just sit back and stay in our comfort zone. And then you're not changing until something comes and forces you.
Right.
You know, my therapist, when I was going through divorce, she said, Tammy, nobody changes without a crisis.
Yes, that's true. And sometimes a crisis, while crises don't generally feel good, they often lead to personal growth, which leads to more happiness.
Right.
You know, happiness is not about making sure that you feel pleasure all the time.
Right.
It's not the same thing. Happiness is, in some ways, a lifetime process. It's something that we nurture both in the ups of life and the downs of life.
Right. And happiness tends to be like, I tend to think of it as, you know, sometimes I feel like people get this concept of, well, you know, I'll be happy when this happens. I'll be happy when that happens. And suddenly, you know, like happiness is this point on a journey that you hit.
Yes.
You know, and then you'll decide to be happy.
Right.
And the problem,
once you get rid of all the sine qua nons, you get rid of all the obstacles
yes,
that cause you that are stealing your happiness. And then once you have checked all those off, then you'll be happy.
right. And so, this really, the happiness is something that you have to kind of decide that you're going to learn how to be happy in the circumstance in which you find yourself.
Right.
And one of the best ways to be able to do that, in my experience, is by practicing gratitude daily.
Yes, daily gratitude is a very good method.
Yeah, by journaling or whatever method it works for you to have gratitude. And for a long time, especially when I was younger, I think it was kind of like, well, I'm not happy with the way things are, because if I'm happy with the way things are, well, no, I want more than this. I'm not satisfied with this. And I think there's a balance to that. I'm not saying don't be ambitious and don't pursue things and don't try to better yourself or your situation or whatever, but also don't be a malcontent. Be grateful for the things that you do have, the journey that you have come through, and the growth that you have experienced.
That's true. That's true. One of the things I wanted to say at the beginning is that there's a sense in which happy people make the world worse. And strike that. Unhappy people make the world a worse place to live in, and happy people make the world a better place to live in.
Right.
We all know those people, right? They're always complaining, and it's always, people are doing this to me. There's a guy at church that continually feels that he's getting the short end of the stick. He's not getting the leadership position that he wants, or his opinions aren't valued enough, and he's always griping about it. And it's interesting because the more he gripes about it, the less people want to give him those opportunities.
Right, because he's being negative.
Right, so it becomes a vicious cycle. And then, whereas that person who's willing to take on the most menial of jobs with a positive attitude, that's the person everybody's attracted to, and that's the person everybody wants to give. It's like what Jesus says in the parable of the talents, that we take away that which is given to the stingy person, and we give it to the person that already has a lot.
Right, because he's going to share it.
Because he's attracting good things into his life,
right,
with his happy, positive attitude. Whereas the person that's griping and grumbling, well, nobody wants to be around that.
Right. And I think that, this is very true when it comes to our parenting. Like if you're negative and you're in a bad mindset and you're,
that's true,
struggling, then everything your kids do is going to get on your nerves. You're going to be yelling at them more. You're going to be unhappy with them. And then what happens is they also learn that way of moving through the world.
Right.
So then you're not
raise
only
grumpy children.
Right. So you're not only being negative, you're raising negative children.
Right.
And honestly, I'm a little bit guilty of this. When I was younger, this was a big struggle. And I think that, as I got older, it got better. But I think definitely, especially my poor first child, suffered the brunt of it in my negativity. And it's something that I think he's, tried to learn and work on and do better with as well. But it's real easy to wake up on that side of the bed and just sort of be grumpy and go through your whole day like that.
Yeah. And when people are focused on the other world and try to control it and trying to change the other person, trying to get them to stop doing this, stop sending nasty messages, stop manipulating me, try to get the diapers changed before the transition, whatever it is. Now that person is focused on that other world, and that's the person that's listening to the children to see if they can get any intel on the other side, and is tempted to ask questions about the other world and sort of put the kids in the middle. And that's where you don't want the kids.
Right.
Yeah. You want to do them. You want to do fun stuff with them, like going to the beach or digging holes in the sand, as one of my episodes, or just being with them and really kind of making your world positive.
Right. Really fun and exciting and interesting. And the place where they feel heard and they can share their feelings and
Right.
and their struggles. I mean, not that we don't have struggles, we do, but you certainly want to be able to talk to them about it and help them deal with it in a positive,
Right.
constructive way. And if all they see is you complaining and having a hard time, that's how they're going to learn to process things too. So, another thing I do is sometimes in the mornings I'll listen to something motivational on YouTube, or,
Right.
Thomas gets up and does his Bible study.
Right.
Some mornings I meditate. Um, you have to be really intentional about this, because I think it's the very rare person that is just happy by default all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Well,
don't.
some people have that disposition. Like there's that gal at church, pastor's daughter that, I mean, this person is always cheerful. And I just love being around her because she always has a smile. She always has a good word. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's the person you want to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. But she's a rarity. Like most
Yeah.
of it. And I would imagine that behind closed doors, she has her own struggles. It's just not what she puts out to the world, right? But I think you have to be real intentional about, about putting yourself in that state of mind.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
and you'll see if you can start to do that and start to implement some of these practices or whatever works for you. If it's a morning workout, if it's
Yeah.
drinking more water and less soda, whatever
Right.
it is that makes you feel better,
Right.
and starting to try to focus on
So self-care.
self-care, and especially I think the mental health sort of spirituality aspects of healthcare and of self-care in particular. I mean, I think if you're feeling, the reason I said, water or whatever, if you're feeling bad, if you wake up and you have a raging headache because you're always dehydrated, then okay,
Well, that's a problem.
then you're going to be grumpy every day, right?
Yeah.
So you're not drinking enough water, whatever the issue is. And most of us know, most of us know what our issues are. We just don't
Right.
having the self-discipline to do something about it is the hardest part.
Yeah, I think one good practice is to find some way to develop yourself every day.
Right.
Like for some of us, it's losing weight, and for some of us, it's getting in shape, or for some of us, it's learning a new thing, like learning a foreign language, for example, can be, or getting some books, or learning about great literature,
Right.
or anything that you can do to develop yourself mentally or develop yourself spiritually or intellectually. You should do that, because like Tammy said at the beginning, if you're not growing, you're not going to be happy.
Right.
If you're growing, you're going to be happy.
Right.
If you're becoming a more effective parent, you're going to be happy. And if you're letting this defeat you, you're going to be unhappy.
Well, and let's be clear that there is no such thing as just remaining stagnant. That you're either growing or decaying.
Right. Oh, that's true.
It's one or the other. If you're not growing, then you're decaying. A flower that stops growing doesn't just stay there and stay that flower for the end of time. It dies.
Yeah.
That's what happens. And the same happens with people. That's why they talk about different studies where when people actually officially retire and don't have any,
Right.
thing that replaces it, or that they do or whatever, I think
They slowly fade away.
Well, I was reading
Yeah.
the other day, I think the average length of time after retirement is like 6 years.
Right.
The average length of time people survive. That's not very long.
Right. So you're literally killing yourself with your failure to grow. And what an opportunity to grow. I play classical guitar, and I'm also a surfer. So
Mostly a surfer.
eventually the physicality of surfing is pretty high level. So eventually I'm going to have to give that up, but I'll never have to give up my guitar music.
Right.
And I can always grow on it. Like I've been practicing more lately, and I find what happens if I don't practice for a month or two, my technique falls apart. My arpeggios are slower and they're not as even.
He had a little surf injury is the only thing that's.
Yeah, so I got to find something else
So
to do.
now you're rusty on your guitar because you've been out surfing so much.
Hey, surfing's a blast. It's but the surfing is what Tammy was talking about earlier. Surfing is something I do that helps my breathing, and it helps my physicality, and it keeps me and it's a blast. And so when I come home and I've had a surf session, even if it's followed by a day of work, at the end of that day, I feel like my breathing feels better.
Yeah.
My muscles feel better. I have enough tired from it that it helps me to sleep.
It reduces your anxiety.
Yeah, it's super healthy. And there's a lot of stuff like that. Going for walks in the beauty of nature.
Right.
And maybe taking up jogging is something I used to do when I was younger.
Yeah, and if you maybe as we're talking, you're thinking, well, I do pretty good managing myself, but my ex is super, super negative. That's
a problem.
And that's one of the things that I think what happens is it becomes even more critical.
Right.
For you to be positive and approach, things in a happy, positive way, especially if you have a co-parent that doesn't do that. Because if you're both not doing it, then the child's not seeing it anywhere. If you're doing it, at least the child is seeing a model of that.
Right.
And in our experience, what happens is the children actually tend to start gravitating towards
a healthier, happier parent.
The healthier, happier parent. That's right.
Right. So if you have one of those really negative co-parents that is bringing your world down, my advice is to get a divorce. Wait a minute, you're already getting a divorce. Wow. So what you're telling me then is that you're letting somebody that you're divorcing or divorced from come into your world and crap all over your world.
You know what? I have to tell you, this is like such a huge percentage of my coaching.
Yeah.
This is such a huge percentage of it, because what happens inevitably is that people get messages from their ex, especially when you have these higher conflict, one person's really negative or both people are negative, and they go back and forth and they have, like a talking parents or an Our Family Wizard, because communication equals conflict. And so, but what happens is when that message comes in, you react to it,
right.
And I'm telling you, so many times that's all it's intended to do is to push your button.
Yeah.
And one of the first things I start working with people on is, how can we dissect this and look at what's really being said and figure out how much of it is BS, which is frankly a large percentage of it.
Bullpucky.
Yes. Because once you can start to do that, it reduces your fear and anxiety, because you start to realize that I don't need to be worried about this.
Yeah,
I don't need to feel threatened by this. This is just an attempt to push my buttons.
Right. And so you don't let them, you put a boundary up and you say, I'm not going to react to this. This is just his sick or her sickness that's coming into my world, and I'm going to put up a barrier and deflect it. And one of the things that I've learned in this whole process, and I've run the whole gauntlet from having a high conflict relationship with my ex to having cooperation.
Right.
And what I have to do is not so much not focus on them, but change my focus, because you got to focus on something.
Well, yourself, hopefully.
Yeah. You got to focus. Your attention and your energy has got to go somewhere. So why not build something? Okay. If you're a religious person, does God want you to be miserable, or does God want you to be happy?
Right.
Does God want you to grow, or does God want you to sit there waiting for the next bomb to come from your ex.
Right. Right. And what happens is, usually when I start with people, it's like, okay, we're only going to check this once a day. We're only going to check the message board once a day, and we're going to pick a time of day. We're not going to pick 10 o'clock at night before I lay down and go to sleep, because then I'm going to be stressed and freaked out and whatever at that stage of night. We're going to pick a time of day where I'm level-headed and feeling my best and I can deal with whatever comes up. But as I start to work with people in dissecting the messages and really looking at the reality of what's being said or threatened or how unlikely it is and all those types of things, what happens is you get to the point where it becomes almost funny.
It is funny.
I mean, I'm 15. I'm more than 15. Actually, I'm what? Yeah, I am. I'm 15 years out from marriage, from divorce, 16 years out from the separation. But at this point, a lot of times I'll get something from my ex and I just laugh. Like, he's still the same. He's still
trying to pull his old tricks.
Yeah, he's still running on this hamster wheel, trying the same thing. And the problem is, it just doesn't work on me anymore. Like, the blinders have been removed.
Right.
But boy, I am telling you, that first, how many years did it take me? Several.
Right.
Several. I can remember early on in our relationship, Thomas saying, like, why are you like running around with a chicken like its head cut off over this person? Like, I don't understand why you even still give him the time of day. And it's really weird because it has this almost emotional, type grip on you, especially if you were married to somebody that has, a high conflict personality. If they're narcissistic, if they're bipolar, if they're borderline, if they're, whatever, pick your high conflict diagnosis.
Right. And both of us had that.
Yeah. And when you're dealing with somebody like that, it's like the emotional, like one of the ways that you always describe your relationship with your ex-wife is like, boy, when it was good, it was good. But when it was bad, it was really bad.
It was really terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. And mine was sort of like that. I think less severe, but it was sort of like, oh, he'd be nice for a while because he'd need something, or he'd, want intimacy, or he'd want, me to do something or whatever for him. And then as soon as that hurdle was crossed, whatever it was, whether we were buying a new car for him or we were, whatever, then it's like he went back to his old nasty self, and the whole marriage had that cycle to it.
Well, I think the turning point for me was when I made a decision that I was going to focus on creating this. And what's this? Well, this is Divorce University Online.
Right.
This is what we're building.
Right.
And in order to get there, I started out this journey with very little experience in family law other than my own.
Right.
And I hung out a shingle and just started learning as much as I could. And learning, reading, finding all the books. If you see all the books that I have that I read, and
praise God for Kindle is all I got to say
about high conflict divorce and how to handle people. And we have the Bill Eddy books from about high conflict people and that kind of stuff. And we learned this business, and for a while it just stagnated. And there were times, not that long ago, really, like 7 or 8 years ago, where we couldn't. Where I had to go to my mom and borrow a couple $100 for some food.
Well, I don't think I think it's probably been over 10 years since we borrowed money from mom for food, but we definitely had a little struggle about 8 years ago, because that's around the time my mother passed away. So we've gone through hills, mountains and valleys with it.
But here's the thing, Tammy and I have always had our eye on building this.
Right.
And what's weird is, like, over the last year, it suddenly has taken off.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. It's like you work and you work and you work and you build and you build and you build. And then one day it pops. That's kind of how I've experienced this.
Yeah.
And what a joy. And I don't have time for her BS. I don't have time for it.
Right.
I'm too busy having fun.
Yeah, you're surfing. I mean, I think we try to focus on surfing. We try to focus on, a lot of times you have a new mate or new marriage or whatever. We try to focus on that. Focus on the kids when they're here with us. We try to leave them alone when they're not. We try not to interfere in mom's world. And we try to focus.
Because she's entitled to do her thing, too. She's entitled to be happy.
Right.
And I want her to be happy.
Right.
And you know how I can make her happy? By leaving her alone.
I'm not sure it's helping.
And then, and that's good for the kids.
Yeah.
Because I leave her alone. She's happy. She doesn't manipulate the kids.
Right. Right. That's true. I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot in the co-parenting especially is just, and this is the opposite of what most people want to do just by natural inclination. But what you really want to do is try to build trust with your co-parent. Because if you can keep doing things and sending messages that, hey, you can trust me, you can trust me, you can trust me, whether that's picking up slack or, making your payments on time or being present on time for the exchanges or, oh yeah, I've got an extra pillow here, you can have it, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Lovey.
Yeah, extra lovey. Yeah, that's a whole nother story for a whole nother podcast. But if you can do those things that constantly send that message of hey, I'm not trying to take you down, and I think that if you're an unhappy person, that does kind of become the goal. Well, I'm unhappy, so I'm going to make sure everyone else around me is miserable too, as miserable as I am. And if you can do things to build that trust, and I'm telling you, that can take years sometimes. I'm not saying you do it for 3 months and everything's going to be fine. But if you can build that trust over time, then what happens is you're happier, they're happier, the kids are happier.
Right.
And everybody's stress and anxiety is way less. Because the reason the other parent digs in and does their thing is because they have fear of losing the children, just like you do.
Right. That's true.
I've never met one person that went through a child custody or divorce issue that wasn't worried about losing their kids.
Right. And to the extent that you can allay those fears in the other person, you make your life easier.
Right.
And you make your children happier.
Right.
We in my co-parent, we're on the home stretch. We've got a 17-year-old that's coming up on his senior year in high school, and he's the last one.
Yes.
Mercifully.
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. But these kids are resilient.
Yes.
They're strong. I hesitate to use the word happy because the older boy, he can be negative.
Yes, we're working on that with him now. Yes.
But we're working on that, and we're teaching him
right
some of our life philosophy and some of the ways that he can get outside of himself and look at the world as a place of opportunity instead of a place where he has to hunker down and defend himself against everything.
Yeah.
And that's bearing fruit. He's doing better.
Yeah.
And that's the whole goal of this process is to, despite the difficulties inherent in divorce in raising children, you want to raise good, strong, resilient kids that are able to go out there and influence the world for good.
Yes. And, getting outside yourself is one of the best things you can do, in my experience, to create happiness for yourself. Because it's real easy if you stay in your own little world and your own little 4 walls to feel like life is hard. Life is hard for me. I have these struggles. You feel like other people don't have them. Especially when you're going for divorce or child custody issues, it's like, I remember feeling like I was the only person in the world getting a divorce because it happens at different times for all of us. But there's always someone that has it harder than you.
That's true.
And if you can put yourself in a position where you can help other people, that are not as far down the road as you in your journey.
Right.
That's
huge.
That's huge. That's essentially what I've done is I've taken that experience, and I say to people, sometimes people go, how do you do this all day? How do you work in divorce and a subject that's so negative and
awesome.
People that are struggling so bad? How do you do that day in and day out? And what I tell people is I get as much, if not more, healing and happiness from that experience just about than my clients do, I think.
Right.
I mean, obviously you can't measure somebody else's experience for them, but I get my own benefits from it, from that
Right.
contribution.
And you know what's cool about it too is you don't have to wait for the court to make a ruling on that.
Right.
You don't have to control anybody else or do anything. This is all within your control.
Right.
If you only knew.
Yes.
If you only knew that you can create this almost out of nothing by
Right.
changing your attitude
Right.
and saying, I am no longer I don't want to even use the word victim, but I'm not a victim.
Right.
I am not a victim. I am not at this person's, I will not be controlled. I will take what God Almighty has given me to give to the world, and I will give it to the world.
Right.
And I will make good money doing it.
Right. Right. And you got to find that. And sometimes that's a bit of a journey to figure it out. But you've come through this process, or you're going through this process for a reason. There's some lesson in it. There's
Right.
some thing that it's going to build in you that's going to help you serve other people down the road.
Right.
And that's the key to happiness is not sacrificing yourself. If you've been in high conflict relationships, we're not talking about the type of thing of serving others where you just don't have any boundaries and you let the person totally overtake you. That's not the same thing. But being of service to others while
Right.
still having your own self-care and your own healthy processes around happiness and all that kind of
Mhm.
thing will just improve your life exponentially.
Right. Right. So bottom line, be happy. It'll help you win your case. It'll help you to have better relationships with your children. And if it doesn't work, you'll still be happy.
Here you go.
If
Yeah, judges don't like grumpy people either.
That's true.
Yeah, it's true.
That is true.
It's true. The happier person does better, even in court. So
Yeah. Like Pierre, it's like, yeah, the case. Your Honor, this is a case where my client, and he's happy and he's funny. And
this is another attorney Thomas is talking
and
about.
he weaves it into a story that's fun to listen to.
Yeah.
And you can't help liking this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way you want to be if you're in front of the court, because
Yeah.
you get more flies with honey, as the old saying goes.
Right.
So. All right. So if you're listening to us on YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you get notified as new videos come out. If you're listening to the podcast in, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us at, don't forget to rate and review us and hit subscribe so you get notified as new episodes are released each week. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.